Captain Jake Morrison sat in the uncomfortable chair and tried not to show his annoyance. The studio lights were too bright and the makeup artist had put too much powder on his face. He could feel sweat starting to form under his military uniform. Despite the cool air in the room, across from him sat Zara Veltar, the most famous talk show host in the galaxy. Her purple skin gleamed under the studio lights, and her forearms moved gracefully as she shuffled through her notes. Her large black eyes looked at Jake like he was some kind of strange bug she had found under a rock. The space station Nexus Prime spun slowly outside the studio windows. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went from the massive docking bays. Jake had been to this station many times before, but never for something like this. He was a soldier, not a celebrity. "We are back in 30 seconds, called out the director, a short green creature with too many eyes. The studio audience buzzed with conversation. Most of them were aliens from the core worlds. Rich politicians, business leaders, and media types who had never held a weapon in their lives. Jake looked down at his hands. They were scarred from years of fighting. His left hand was missing 2 fingers from a battle on Kepler 7. His right hand had a burn mark from when his ship had caught fire during the siege of New Colorado. These soft aliens in their expensive clothes had no idea what real war looked like. "And we are live in 3, 2, 1, the director pointed at Zara. Zara's face lit up with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. "Welcome back to Galaxy Tonight. I am your host, Zara Veltar, and we are here with Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Fleet." She turned to look at Jake with that same fake smile. "Captain Morrison, thank you for joining us." "Thank you for having me," Jake said. His voice was quiet and rough, like gravel in a bucket. "Now, Captain, your species has been making quite a lot of noise lately about your military victories. The Battle of Proxima Station, the defense of the mining colonies, the rescue mission at Beta Centauri. Very impressive stuff." Zara's voice had a mocking tone that made Jake's jaw tighten. "But I have to ask, do you really think these were victories, or just lucky accidents?" The studio audience chuckled. Jake did not react. "I mean, let us be honest here," Zara continued, leaning forward like she was sharing a secret. "Humans are still using projectile weapons when the rest of the galaxy moved to energy weapons centuries ago. You still send soldiers into battle wearing metal armor when we have personal shield generators. Your ships look like they were built in someone's garage." More laughter from the audience. A few aliens in the front row were pointing at Jake and whispering to each other. "Your tactics are so primitive," Zara went on, charging straight at the enemy, ramming ships into each other, fighting hand-to-hand combat. "I watched the footage from the Vega conflict, and it looked like something from the Dark Ages. Tell me, Captain, when are humans going to grow up and fight like civilized beings?" Jake sat perfectly still. His gray eyes never left Zara's face, but he said nothing. "And do not get me started on your so-called values," Zara said, her voice getting louder. "Honor, loyalty, sacrifice. These are outdated concepts, Captain. The modern galaxy runs on efficiency, not emotion. Smart species use robots and drones to fight their wars. They do not send their own people to die for abstract ideas." An alien in the audience shouted, "Tell him, Zara," and the crowd laughed again. "Look at the Altarian Defense Force," Zara said, gesturing to herself with pride. "We have not lost a single soldier in 50 years because we fight smart, not hard. We use advanced AI systems, remote-controlled weapons, and strategic calculations that your human brain simply cannot match." Jake's knuckles went white as his hands gripped the arms of his chair, but his face remained calm. "The Centaurian Empire has automated battle stations that can destroy entire fleets without a single living being on board," Zara continued. "The Vegan Republic uses thought-controlled weapons that react faster than any human ever could. Even the tiny Rigel Confederation has technology that makes your Earthships look like children's toys." She paused for effect, then delivered what she thought was the killing blow. "So tell me, Captain Morrison, why should the galaxy take human military power seriously when you insist on fighting like barbarians with slightly better weapons?" The studio fell quiet, waiting for Jake's response. The camera zoomed in on his weathered face. His gray hair was cut short in military style, and his beard had streaks of white that made him look older than his 50 years. There were lines around his eyes from squinting in the harsh light of alien suns. Jake reached up and scratched his chin, taking his time. The silence stretched on until it became uncomfortable. Zara shifted in her seat, clearly expecting him to defend himself loudly or maybe even get angry. Instead, Jake leaned back in his chair and looked directly into the camera. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady, like he was talking to an old friend. "You know what, ma'am? You might be right about some of that," he said. The audience murmured in surprise. "We humans do still use bullets and bombs when you folks have fancy energy weapons. We do send our own people into battle instead of hiding behind robots. And yes, our ships do look like we built them in a garage because sometimes we actually do." Zara smiled, thinking she had won. "But here is the thing," Jake continued, his voice never changing tone. "When the shooting starts, when the real trouble comes knocking, who does everyone call?" The smile faded from Zara's face. "When the Void Swarm attacked the Centaurian colonies and your fancy automated defenses could not stop them, who showed up with old-fashioned ships and old-fashioned soldiers to drive them back?" Jake paused, letting the question hang in the air. "When the Crystal Pirates took over 3 Vegan Republic systems and your thought-controlled weapons could not touch them, who went in with nothing but rifles and determination to get your people back?" The studio was completely quiet now. Even the camera operators had stopped moving. "And when the machine uprising started on Altair Prime and threatened to wipe out your entire civilization?" Jake said, looking directly at Zara. "Who was it that landed on your home world and fought those robots street by street, building by building until your people were safe?" Zara's purple skin had gone pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Jake leaned forward slightly, his gray eyes never leaving hers. "We humans have a saying, ma'am. Do not mistake kindness for weakness. You can mock our methods all you want. You can laugh at our ships and our weapons and our old-fashioned ideas about honor. But when the galaxy needs saving, when the real monsters come calling, you do not call the Altarians or the Centaurians or the Vegans." He paused one more time, then delivered his final words in the same quiet, steady voice. "You call us." The silence in the studio stretched on like a rubber band about to snap. Zara Veltar stared at Captain Jake Morrison with her mouth slightly open. Her forearms had stopped moving completely, which Jake knew meant she was either very surprised or very angry. Maybe both. The alien audience sat frozen in their seats. A few of them looked uncomfortable, shifting around and avoiding eye contact with the cameras. Others whispered to each other in languages Jake did not understand, but their tone sounded worried. Jake could see the director in the corner making frantic hand signals at Zara. The green creature's many eyes were wide with panic. This was supposed to be a simple interview where the famous host made fun of the primitive human, and everyone had a good laugh. Instead, the human had just reminded the entire galaxy of some very uncomfortable truths. Zara finally found her voice, but it came out smaller than before. That was different circumstances," she said, trying to regain her confidence. "Those were special situations that required..." "Required what?" Jake asked quietly. He did not raise his voice or lean forward. He just sat there like a man, waiting for the rain to stop. "Required someone willing to bleed for strangers? Required someone who would not run when things got bad?" Zara's purple skin flushed darker. "We Altarians are not cowards," she snapped. "We simply believe in fighting smart, not throwing lives away for no reason." "No reason," Jake repeated, and for the first time since the interview started, he showed emotion. His gray eyes went cold as winter steel. "Tell that to the families. On Altair Prime, tell them their children's lives were no reason to fight." The camera operator zoomed in on Jake's face. The scars on his hands seemed more visible under the bright lights. There was a long scar running from his left ear to his jaw that the makeup had not been able to hide completely. "Captain Morrison," Zara said, trying to take control of the interview again, "surely you understand that modern warfare should be about technology and strategy, not about..." She waved one of her hands dismissively. "Emotional responses and primitive honor codes." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He held it up so the camera could see it. The picture showed a group of human soldiers standing in front of a destroyed building. They all looked tired and dirty, but they were smiling. "This was taken on Rigel 4, Jake said. "After we stopped the slave traders who had been kidnapping children from the outer colonies. That building behind us used to be where they kept the kids." He turned the photo so he could look at it. Half the men in this picture did not make it home. He put the photo back in his pocket. "The Rigel government offered to pay us. Offered us mining rights, trade agreements, all kinds of valuable things. You know what we told them?" Zara shook her head. "We told them to keep their money and just take care of those kids." Jake's voice was still quiet, but there was something in it. Now that made the whole studio feel smaller. Because that is what you do when someone needs help. You help them. Not because you will get something out of it, but because it is the right thing to do. An alien in the front row, a tall blue creature with silver eyes, stood up suddenly. "Captain Morrison," he said in accented but clear English. "I am Ambassador Keth from the Rigel Confederation. I was there when your ships arrived at Rigel 4. I saw what your people did." The camera swung to focus on the ambassador. Zara looked annoyed at the interruption, but she could not stop a government official from speaking. "My own daughter was one of the children your soldiers rescued," Ambassador Keth continued. "She was 8 years old. She had been missing for 3 months. When your Marines found her, she was sick and scared and did not trust anyone." His silver eyes were bright with unshed tears. "But your sergeant, a big man with kind eyes, he sat with her for hours. He gave her his own food. He showed her pictures of his own children back on Earth. He made her feel safe again." The ambassador turned to look directly at Zara. "That sergeant's name was William Chen. He died 2 days later when the slavers tried to take back their base. He died protecting children who were not even his own species." The studio was so quiet that Jake could hear the hum of the air recycling system. "So when this host speaks of primitive human values," Ambassador Keth said, his voice getting stronger, "I think of Sergeant Chen. I think of how he died so that alien children could live free. And I wonder what is more civilized, advanced weapons or an advanced heart." He sat back down. Zara looked like she had been slapped. Jake nodded respectfully to the ambassador, then turned back to face Zara. "That is who we are," he said simply. "That is what humans do. We show up, we do the job, we pay the price, and we do not ask for parades or statues or thank you cards." "But surely," Zara said, her voice sounding desperate now, "surely you can see that there are better ways to solve problems than violence and sacrifice?" Jake smiled for the first time since the interview started. It was not a happy smile. "Ma'am, I have been fighting in space for 28 years. I have seen things that would give you nightmares for the rest of your life. And in all that time, in all those battles and wars and conflicts, I have learned one simple truth." He paused, looking around the studio at all the comfortable, well-dressed aliens who had never missed a meal or worried about monsters in the dark. Sometimes the only thing standing between good people and very bad people is someone willing to do violence on behalf of good people. Someone willing to walk into the dark places and fight the monsters so that everyone else can sleep safely at night. Jake stood up slowly. His uniform was perfectly pressed despite the hot studio lights. "You can call that primitive if you want. You can laugh at our honor and our loyalty and our willingness to die for strangers. But when the monsters come alive, and they always come eventually, you will not call the Altarian philosophers or the Centaurian computers or the vegan peace negotiators." He looked directly into the main camera, speaking to everyone watching across the galaxy. "You will call the humans. Because we are the ones who walk into the dark. We are the ones who stand between you and the things that want to hurt you. And we do it not because we have to, but because someone should." Jake turned and walked toward the studio exit. Behind him, Zara sat speechless in her chair, and the alien audience watched in complete silence as the scarred human soldier left the stage. Just as Jake reached the door, Ambassador Keth's voice called out across the studio, "Thank you, Captain Morrison, for everything." Jake paused at the doorway, looked back once, and nodded. Then he was gone, leaving behind a studio full of very quiet aliens who were suddenly thinking about things they had never thought about before. Jake Morrison had barely made it 10 steps down the corridor when the lights began to flicker. At first he thought it was just a power problem. Space stations had technical issues all the time, but then the floor started to vibrate under his feet, and he knew this was something much worse. Behind him, he could hear confused voices from the studio. Zara was probably trying to figure out how to end the interview after what had just happened. The alien audience was likely talking among themselves, still processing what they had witnessed. Then the alarm started. A sharp, piercing sound filled the corridor, followed by a mechanical voice speaking in the common galactic language. Alert! Alert! Unknown vessels approaching station. All personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Jake stopped walking and pulled out his communicator. The small device crackled to life when he pressed the button. Morrison to Resolute. Danny, you hearing this? Lieutenant Danny Torres answered immediately. His voice sounded tense through the static. Yes, sir, we are picking up multiple contacts on long-range sensors. Big ones, Captain. Really big ones. How many? Jake asked, already knowing he would not like the answer. At least 50 ships, sir. Maybe more. They just dropped out of hyperspace, about 3 million kilometers out. And Captain... Danny's voice trailed off. What is it, son? They are not showing up on any of our identification systems. Not human, not Altarian, not Centaurian, not any species we have on file. These ships are completely unknown. Jake felt ice forming in his stomach. In 30 years of space travel, he had learned that unknown usually meant bad news. Very bad news. The alarm continued to wail throughout the station. Jake could hear people running in the corridors nearby. Voices were getting louder and more, panicked. He started walking quickly toward the docking bay where his ship was berthed. Danny, prep the ship for immediate departure. Charge all weapons and raise shields, and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we have a potential first contact situation that looks hostile. Already on it, sir. Should I request backup? Jake thought about it for a moment. The nearest Earth fleet was 6 days away at maximum jump speed. Whatever was happening here would be over long before help could arrive. Negative. We are on our own for now. Just keep the ship ready and monitor those incoming contacts. Jake cut the connection and picked up his pace. The station was starting to shake more violently now. Emergency lights had kicked in, bathing everything in red. People were running past him, heading for the emergency shelters deep in the station's core. He recognized some of the faces. Civilian traders, diplomatic staff, tourists who had come to see the famous neutral station. Most of them looked terrified. A few of the younger ones were crying. Jake turned a corner and nearly ran into Ambassador Keith from Rigel. The tall blue alien was carrying a small travel bag and looked scared but determined. Captain Morrison, the ambassador said, grabbing Jake's arm with one of his long, thin hands. What is happening? The station authorities are not telling us anything useful. Unknown ships approaching, Jake replied. Probably not friendly. You need to get to the emergency shelters with everyone else. What about you? I am going to my ship. Someone needs to find out what these newcomers want. Ambassador Keth's silver eyes went wide. By yourself? Captain, that could be suicide. Jake gave him a grim smile. Probably. But that is what we humans do, remember? Before the ambassador could respond, the station shook so hard that both men had to grab the wall to keep from falling. The lights went out completely for a few seconds, then came back on dimmer than before. Jake's communicator crackled again. Captain, this is Torres. You need to get up here now. These new ships, they are not like anything I have ever seen. On my way, Jake replied. He looked at Ambassador Keth. Get to the shelters. Keep everyone calm if you can. Jake ran the rest of the way to the docking bay. The usual busy activity was gone, replaced by empty corridors and sealed blast doors. His footsteps echoed in the silence between alarm pulses. When he reached the docking bay, he could see his ship through the viewing window. The TDF Resolute was not much to look at compared to the sleek alien vessels usually docked here. It was Basically a modified cargo hauler with weapons bolted onto the hull and extra armor plating welded over the important parts. It looked exactly like what Zara had mocked during the interview, something built in someone's garage. But it was tough, reliable, and it had brought Jake home from more fights than he could count. He climbed aboard through the airlock and headed straight for the bridge. Lieutenant Torres was already there, staring at the main display screen with a worried expression. Danny Torres was 26 years old and had been serving under Jake for 3 years. He was smart, brave, and good with the ship's computers. He was also from Texas and had never learned to hide what he was thinking. Right now, what he was thinking was clearly visible on his face. "Show me," Jake said, settling into the captain's chair. Danny pressed a few buttons and the main screen lit up with a tactical display. Jake had seen a lot of enemy fleets in his time, but nothing like this. The ships were huge, easily twice the size of the biggest human dreadnoughts. They were black, so black that they seemed to absorb the light from nearby stars. Their hulls were smooth with no visible weapons or engines or any of the normal features you would expect to see on a starship. "How many?" Jake asked. 63. "Ships confirmed, sir. Possibly more behind them. They are arranged in a perfect formation like they are all controlled by the same mind." Jake studied the display. The alien ships were moving toward Nexus Prime in a steady, unstoppable line. They were not hurrying, but they were not slowing down either. It reminded him of watching a glacier move, slow, inevitable, and destructive. "Any response to our hails?" "Nothing, sir. We have tried every frequency, every language in the database. They are not talking." The station shook again, harder this time. Through the docking bay windows, Jake could see other ships trying to leave. A fancy Altarian pleasure yacht was having trouble with its engines. A Centaurian trade vessel was loading passengers as fast as possible. "Sir," Danny said quietly, "what do you think they want?" Jake watched the black ships getting closer on the display. He had a bad feeling that he already knew the answer. "I do not think they want anything, son. I think they want everything." As if responding to his words, the lead alien ship suddenly lit up with a blinding flash of energy. A beam of pure white light reached out across space and struck one of the departing civilian ships. The vessel simply disappeared, vaporized instantly with no debris left behind. The station's alarms got louder and more urgent. Jake gripped the arms of his chair and watched as the black ships continued their approach. "Danny," he said calmly, "remember what I said about prep for departure?" "Yes, sir. Forget departure, prep for war." The bridge of the TDF Resolute was small and cramped compared to the sleek alien warships Jake had seen in his career. Everything was built for function, not comfort. The walls were lined with pipes and cables that any engineer would have hidden behind panels. The chairs were basic military issue, designed to keep a person alive during combat, not to look pretty. Jake sat in his captain's chair and watched the tactical display as more black ships appeared on the sensors. The numbers kept climbing. 70 ships, 80, 90. Each one was massive and silent and moving toward the station like death itself. "Sir," Danny said from his position at the communications console, "I am getting emergency broadcasts from all over the sector. These black ships are not just here. They have appeared at 12 different systems simultaneously." Jake felt his blood go cold. A coordinated attack across multiple systems meant this was not some random raid or territorial dispute. This was an invasion. "Any word from the other systems?" Danny's face went pale as he listened to his headset. "Sir, the reports are... they are not good. The colony at New Geneva is gone, just gone. The orbital stations around Proxima are not responding. And sir, the listening post at Wolf 359 sent one message before they went silent." "What did they say?" "Ships like black holes, Captain. They eat light and spit out death." Jake absorbed this information while watching another civilian transport get vaporized by the approaching fleet. The beam weapons the black ships used were unlike anything he had ever seen. No visible energy discharge, no heat bloom, no debris. The target simply ceased to exist. His communicator buzzed with an incoming message from the station. "Captain Morrison, this is Station Commander Vex. We need all available ships to help with the evacuation." Commander Vex was a Centaurian, one of the species that prided itself on logical thinking and advanced technology. His voice sounded panicked, which was something Jake had never heard from a Centaurian before. "Commander, what is the status of station defenses? Our shields are down to 60% and falling. The weapons systems are having no effect on the enemy ships. Captain Morrison, these things are using technology we do not understand. Our best scientists are saying it might be centuries ahead of anything in the known galaxy." Jake looked at Danny, who was monitoring the enemy fleet movements. The black ships had spread out into a perfect attack formation. They were still 3 hours away at current speed, but when they arrived, the battle would be over quickly. "Commander, I need you to do something for me," Jake said into his communicator. "Gather all the civilian ships still in dock, every transport, every cargo hauler, every private yacht. We are going to need them." "Need them for what, Captain?" "Bait." There was a long pause on the other end. "Captain Morrison, I'm not sure I understand. These black ships are hunting. They want to destroy everything in this system. So we are going to give them targets that look important but are actually empty. Buy some time for the real evacuation ships to get away." Jake could hear Commander Vex talking to someone else in the background. Finally, the Centaurian came back on the line. That is actually a sound tactical approach. But Captain, someone would have to pilot those decoy ships. It would be a suicide mission." "I know," Jake said quietly. Danny looked at him with wide eyes. "Captain, you cannot be thinking." "Danny, send a message to all the human ships in the area. Tell them we need volunteers for a dangerous mission. Full disclosure about the risks. Sir, there are only 3 other human ships docked here. A transport, a mining vessel, and an old survey ship. None of them are military. Send the message anyway." While Danny worked on the communications, Jake opened a private channel to the ship's computer. He began recording a message that would be automatically transmitted to Earth Command if the Resolute was destroyed. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the TDF Resolute. If you are hearing this, it means we did not make it home. Unknown hostile forces have attacked multiple systems simultaneously using technology far in advance of our own. They show no interest in communication or negotiation. They appear to be here for total destruction." Jake paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want it on record that the crew of the Resolute volunteered for this mission. We could have run. Hell, we probably should have run. But that is not who we are." He looked around the small bridge at the handful of young officers who served under him. Danny Torres at communications, Lisa Park at the weapons console, Bobby Kim at engineering, Maria Santos at navigation. None of them were older than 30. All of them had families back on Earth. If anyone back home is wondering why we stayed, tell them it is because someone had to, because there were innocent people who needed protecting, and we were the only ones in position to help. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done." Jake ended the recording and turned back to the tactical display. The black ships were closer now, and more details were becoming visible. Their hulls seemed to shift and move like liquid metal. Occasionally, brief flashes of light would appear deep inside the ships, like lightning in a storm cloud. "Captain," Danny called out, "I have responses from the other human ships, and all 3 are volunteering, sir. Captain Willis on the transport says, and I quote, 'It has been an honor serving with you crazy bastards.' Captain Murphy on the mining ship says his crew is ready to go. And Captain Lee on the survey ship wants to know if ramming speed counts as a battle tactic." Despite everything, Jake smiled. "Tell them all ramming speed definitely counts." The next hour was spent preparing for what everyone knew would be their last battle. The human ships were not warships, but their crews worked with quiet efficiency to turn them into the most dangerous weapons they could manage. Captain Willis loaded his transport with every explosive device they could find on the station. Captain Murphy armed his mining ship with industrial cutting lasers and a hold full of metallic ore that would make excellent shrapnel. Captain Lee filled his survey ship's sample containers with compressed gases that would create a massive explosion on impact. Jake watched it all from his bridge and felt a strange sense of pride. These were merchant captains and civilian crews, not soldiers. But when the time came to stand up and be counted, They had answered the call without hesitation. "Sir," Maria Santos called from the navigation station. "The black ships are changing. Of course, they are splitting into two groups." Jake studied the new formation on his display. One group was heading directly for the station. The other was moving to intercept the evacuation ships that were already fleeing toward the jump points. "Smart," he said. "They want to make sure nothing escapes." Danny looked at him. "Orders, Captain." Jake stood up from his chair and looked at each of his officers in turn. They were scared, but they were ready. They trusted him to lead them into hell itself if necessary. "Launch all decoy ships. Tell them to make as much noise as possible. Fire everything they have. Broadcast on all frequencies. Light themselves up like Christmas trees. Make the enemy think they are seeing the main defense force." "And us, sir?" Jake smiled grimly. "We are going hunting. Target the group heading for the evacuation ships. We are going to show these black ships what happens when you threaten innocent people." The TDF Resolute launched from Nexus Prime and accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Behind them, 3 converted civilian ships followed, ready to die for people they had never met, just like humans always did. The first shot came from the black ships when they were still 2 million kilometers away. A beam of pure white energy that moved faster than anything Jake had ever seen. It missed the Resolute by less than 100 meters, close enough that the ship's hull groaned from the heat. "Evasive maneuvers," Jake ordered calmly. "Lisa, return fire all weapons." Lisa Park's hands flew over the weapons console. The Resolute's main guns opened up, sending streams of plasma bolts and kinetic projectiles toward the nearest black ship. The weapons hit their target dead on, lighting up the alien hull with explosions and energy discharges. For a moment, Jake thought they had scored a direct hit. Then the light faded, and the black ship was completely undamaged. Not even a scorch mark on its hull. "Sir," Lisa called out, her voice tight with stress. "Our weapons are having no effect. It's like shooting at a mountain." Jake watched the tactical display as more black ships turned toward them. The enemy formation was breaking up, with about 20 ships moving to intercept the small human force while the rest continued toward the evacuation fleet. "Danny, signal the other captains. Tell them to spread out and attack from different angles, make the enemy split their attention." Captain Willis in the transport ship was the first to respond. His heavily loaded vessel accelerated directly toward the largest black ship, engines at maximum power. "This is for all the kids back home," his voice crackled over the radio. The transport slammed into the alien vessel at nearly half the speed of light. The explosion lit up space like a new star being born. When the light faded, both ships were gone. "Jesus," Danny whispered. He actually took one out. But Jake was watching the sensors, and what he saw made his heart sink. The black ship was reforming. Like liquid metal flowing back together, the scattered pieces were pulling themselves back into their original shape. Within minutes, the vessel was whole again and continuing its attack. "They can regenerate," Jake said quietly. "Even a direct hit won't stop them permanently." Captain Murphy's mining ship was next. The grizzled old captain had positioned his vessel near an asteroid field, using the rocks as cover while he peppered the black ships with mining lasers and explosive charges. His industrial equipment was not designed for warfare, but Murphy was using it like he had been fighting space battles his whole life. "Come on, you metal bastards," Murphy's voice came over the radio. "Let's see how you like a face full of processed iron ore." His ship's cargo bay opened, releasing a cloud of metallic particles directly into the path of 3 approaching black ships. The aliens flew through the cloud without slowing down, but their hulls began to spark and flicker as the metal interfered with whatever technology they were using. For a few seconds, the black ships seemed confused, their perfect formation wavering. Jake saw his chance. "All ships, concentrate fire on the ones in the metal cloud. Hit them now while they're disrupted." The human vessels opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts, missiles, and kinetic rounds all struck the disoriented black ships at the same time. This time the weapons had an effect. One of the alien vessels began to break apart, its hull cracking like an eggshell. But the victory was short-lived. The other black ships had learned from what happened to their companions. They began firing their white energy beams in a coordinated pattern, creating a web of destruction that was impossible to avoid. Captain Lee's survey ship was caught in the crossfire. The small vessel tried to dodge, but there were too many beams, coming from too many directions. The ship simply vanished, vaporized in an instant. "Lee's gone," Danny reported, his voice shaky. Jake gripped the arms of his chair as the Resolute shook from a near miss. Through the bridge windows he could see the black ships getting closer. Their hulls were still that impossible black color that seemed to absorb all light, but now he could see details on their surfaces, strange symbols that seemed to move and change even as he watched them. "Sir," Maria Santos called from navigation, "I'm picking up a massive energy signature. Something big is coming through the jump point." Jake looked at the long-range sensors and felt his blood turn to ice. More black ships were arriving, hundreds of them. The small human force had barely managed to slow down 20 enemy vessels, and now there were 10 times as many coming to join the fight. "Captain," Bobby Kim's voice came from the engine room. "We've got problems down here. The last near miss damaged our main reactor. We're losing power fast." Jake closed his eyes for a moment, thinking. The evacuation ships were still 40 minutes away from the nearest jump point. The decoy ships back at the station had bought some time, but not enough. And now, with reinforcements arriving, even that small victory would be meaningless. He opened his communication channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Morrison. New orders. Forget about fighting the main force. Our job is to buy time for the evacuation. Hit and run tactics only. Make them chase us away from the civilian ships." Captain Murphy's voice came back immediately. "Jake, there are too many of them. We can't outrun ships that advanced." "We don't have to outrun them, Bill. We just have to make them mad enough to follow us instead of chasing the civilians." Jake turned to Danny. "Send a message to Admiral Ross at Earth Command. Tell her what we've learned about these ships. The metal particle disruption, the regeneration capability, everything. Make sure she knows what humanity is up against." "Sir, if we send that message now, it will give away our position." "I know. Send it anyway." The message burst lasted less than 10 seconds, but it was enough. Every black ship in the area turned toward the Resolute. Jake could see their weapons charging, building up energy for what would certainly be a killing blow. "Danny," Jake said calmly, "I want you to take an escape pod. All of you. Get to the station and help with the evacuation." "Sir, we're not leaving you," Lisa said firmly. "That's an order." "With respect, Captain," Bobby Kim's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Screw your orders. We're staying." Jake looked around the bridge at his young officers. They were all scared, but none of them were backing down. Danny Torres from Texas, who had joined the fleet to see the galaxy. Lisa Park from California, who had wanted to be an engineer but ended up as the best weapons officer Jake had ever served with. Maria Santos from New Mexico, who could navigate through an asteroid field blindfolded. Bobby Kim from Hawaii, who could make any ship run better than it was designed to. They were just kids, really. Kids who should have been back on Earth, going to college or starting careers or falling in. Of them instead, they were here in the deep space, about to die for people they had never met. Jake was proud of them. More proud than he had ever been of anything in his life. "All right then," he said. "If we're going to do this, let's do it right. Maria, set course for the biggest concentration of black ships. Bobby, give me everything the engines have got. Lisa, arm everything we have left." "Even the emergency charges?" Lisa asked. "Everything." The TDF Resolute turned toward the enemy fleet and accelerated to attack speed. Behind them, Captain Murphy's mining ship followed. Its cargo holds empty, but its spirit unbroken. They were 2 small human ships against hundreds of alien vessels, with technology beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The odds were impossible. The mission was suicide, and Jake Morrison had never felt more ready for a fight in his life. The TDF Resolute charged straight into the heart of the black ship formation like a meteor heading for a planet. Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair and watched the enemy vessels grow larger on the main screen. Their dark hulls reflected, no light, making them look like holes torn in space itself. 30 seconds to contact, Maria Santos called from the navigation station. Her voice was steady despite everything they were facing. Jake opened the ship-wide communication channel. All hands, this is the captain. In a few moments, we are going to hit the enemy line. Whatever happens next, I want you all to know it has been an honor serving with you. You are the finest crew I have ever commanded. He paused, then added, and remember what we told that alien TV host. When the shooting starts, they call us. Today we show the galaxy why. The first energy beams reached out toward them like fingers of death. Maria threw the ship into a spinning dive that made everyone's stomach drop, but the maneuver worked. The deadly white light passed harmlessly overhead. Lisa, target their weapons, Jake ordered. Bobby, reroute all power to forward shields. The Resolute's guns opened fire at point-blank range. Plasma bolts and missiles slammed into the nearest black ship's hull. The alien vessel shuddered under the impact, its perfect surface showing cracks and damage for the first time. It's working, Lisa shouted. At close range, our weapons can hurt them. But there were too many black ships and only one Resolute. Energy beams came from every direction, turning space around them into a deadly light show. The ship's shields flared and sparked as they absorbed hit after hit. Shields down to 20%, Bobby reported from engineering. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. We can't take much more of this. That was when Jake heard something that made his heart leap. A new voice on the communication channel speaking with a familiar Earth accent. This is Admiral Betty Ross aboard the TDF Liberty. All human ships form up on me. Let's show these alien bastards how we do things in the Sol system. Jake looked at the tactical display and could not believe what he was seeing. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace all around them. Not sleek, advanced alien vessels, but human ships. Ugly, practical, heavily armed human ships that looked like they had been built in scrapyards and junkyards across known space. The Liberty itself was a converted asteroid mining platform, massive and slow, but bristling with every weapon that could be bolted onto its hull. Behind it came destroyers, frigates, transports that had been turned into missile boats, and even a few civilian ships that had been armed for war. Admiral Ross, Jake said into his communicator, how did you get here so fast? Your boy Torres sent us the enemy data 30 minutes ago, Betty's voice came back. We were already mobilizing for war games when the alert came in. Figured you might need some backup. Jake watched as the human fleet spread out around the black ships in a formation that would have made any military academy instructor weep. There was no coordination, no elegant battle plan, no sophisticated tactics. It was just a mob of angry humans with guns, charging straight at the enemy. It was beautiful. All ships, Admiral Ross broadcast on the general channel. These alien sons of bitches think they can come into our galaxy and push people around. Time to teach them different. Attack Pattern Morrison. Jake blinked in surprise. Attack Pattern Morrison? Named after you, Captain. Betty's voice carried a grin. Charge straight at them. Hit them with everything we've got, and don't stop. Until they're all dead or we are. The human fleet hit the black ships like a hammer hitting glass. But instead of shattering, both forces locked together in the most brutal space battle Jake had ever seen. The black ships had superior technology, but the human ships fought with a savage creativity that no computer could match. Captain Willis's replacement in another transport ship loaded his vessel with nuclear waste and rammed it into an enemy dreadnought. A destroyer captain named Jackson used his ship's tractor beam to grab a black ship and slam it into an asteroid. A frigate called the Houston turned off its artificial gravity and used the spinning motion to fire its guns in all directions at once. But the black ships were learning. They began to work together more efficiently, concentrating their fire and using their regeneration abilities to recover from damage faster than the humans could inflict it. Admiral, Jake called over the radio. We need to hit their command ship, the big one in the center. If we can take that out, maybe the rest will be confused. I see it, Betty replied, but it's surrounded by at least 20 others. Getting through will be suicide. Then I guess it's a good thing we're all crazy, Jake said. He looked around his bridge one more time. Danny Torres was bleeding from a cut on his forehead but still working his communications console. Lisa Park had burns on her hands from an electrical fire but kept targeting the enemy ships. Maria Santos was flying the ship with half the navigation systems offline. Bobby Kim was somehow keeping the engines running despite damage that should have left them dead in space. "You know what?" Jake said to his crew. "I changed my mind about those escape pods." "Too late now, sir," Danny said with a grin. "Escape pods were destroyed 10 minutes ago." Jake laughed, despite everything. "Well then, let's make this count." Maria full speed toward that command ship. "Lisa, arm the self-destruct charges. Bobby, give me every bit of power you can manage." The Resolute accelerated toward the center of the black ship formation. Around them, other human vessels were doing the same thing. Not because they had been ordered to, but because that was what humans did when cornered. They fought back. The command ship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of any human vessel. Its hull was so black it seemed to bend light around it. Strange symbols crawled across its surface like living things. As the Resolute got closer, Jake could see other human ships converging on the same target. Admiral Ross in the Liberty, coming from the port side with all guns blazing. Captain Murphy in his patched mining ship, approaching from below with his cargo hold full of explosive ore. A dozen other vessels, all flying straight into certain death because someone had to make the attempt. 10 seconds to impact, Maria called out. Jake opened the ship-wide channel one last time. "All hands, it has been an honor. Give them hell." The TDF Resolute slammed into the black command ship at nearly the speed of light. The explosion lit up half the solar system. When the light faded, both ships were gone. But something amazing had happened. All across the battlefield, the black ships had stopped moving. Their perfect coordination was broken. Some were spinning aimlessly, others were firing at random targets, and a few were actually shooting at each other. "This is Admiral Ross to all human ships," Betty's voice came over the radio. She was alive, though her ship was badly damaged. "The enemy command structure is down. Hit them while they're confused. Don't give them time to reorganize." The human fleet fell on the disoriented black ships like wolves on a wounded deer. Without their coordination and tactical planning, the alien vessels were still dangerous but no longer unstoppable. The battle lasted another 3 hours. When it was over, the black ships were either destroyed or retreating back to wherever they had come from. The human fleet was battered and bloodied, but they had won. Later, much later, when the wounded had been treated and the dead had been counted, Admiral Ross stood in the ruins of Nexus Prime's main docking bay. Reporters from across the galaxy were there to interview her about the battle. One of them was Zara Veltar, the TV host who had mocked Captain Morrison just hours before. She looked different now, subdued and respectful. "Admiral Ross," Zara said, quietly. "The entire galaxy wants to know how humanity managed to defeat an enemy with such advanced technology." Betty Ross, her uniform torn and stained with smoke, looked directly into the camera. "Ma'am, I think Captain Morrison already answered that question earlier today. When the shooting starts, people call us. Not because we have the best ships or the fanciest weapons, but because we show up. Because we do the job, because we pay the price." She paused, thinking of Jake Morrison and all the others who had died to protect people they had never met. That's who we are. That's what humans do. And if these black ships or anyone else wants to threaten innocent people in this galaxy, they're going to have to go through us first. In the weeks that followed, the interview footage went viral across every inhabited system. Not the part where Zara had mocked human values, but Captain Morrison's quiet response in the battle that proved his words true. Human military advisors found themselves welcome on worlds that had never trusted them before. The phrase, "Don't mistake kindness for weakness," became a galactic motto. And whenever trouble came calling, the first question asked was always the same. "Have you called the humans yet?"